All right, everybody, Justin Roy here with J. Roy and Associates for another sit down. And across from me is Ryan Leheny, founder, CEO of Carolina Casa, a crawl space company here local in Johnston County, North Carolina. I'm going to let Ryan talk a little bit, just give us the brief breakdown before we kind of get into it.
Hey Justin, I appreciate you having me today. Like you said, my name is Ryan Leheny, owner and founder of Carolina Casa. A little brief history about myself. I was born in Danbury, Connecticut back in 1995. Shortly after I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where I spent most of my childhood. I grew up in Holly Springs, North Carolina, so I spent a lot of time in this region of the country with all the seasons that we have. After I graduated high school, I went to East Carolina University. During my junior year in 2016 is when I started up Carolina Casa. I did so because I had some experience in this type of work. I didn't mind getting dirty, crawling around on the ground and climbing up into attics, and I felt like it was a job that, I was an able-bodied young guy, a lot of friends who were, fit in college, and they all needed part-time jobs. So, it ended up being a pretty good situation for myself and some of my friends who needed part-time work. So I started the company in college. After I graduated with a business management degree, I decided to continue pursuing the company, and I moved the base of it over to the Triangle, and now we, operate in the Raleigh area, Raleigh, Durham, as well as far east as Greenville. But most of our work is inside of crawl spaces, basements, and attics.
Awesome. And listen, I know what you guys are thinking. Crawl space is boring, but as a person who is in homes every week, has seen plenty of home inspections, sold plenty of houses with crawl spaces, it is a very, very large necessity in North Carolina and these other southern states with the weather and such. And I always say the crawl space and the attic are the forgotten zones of a home. I don't know, it's rare, so I won't say never, but it's rare where somebody will say, oh yeah, I go down to my crawl space a couple times a year to check things out. It's usually like, I've lived here for 9 years, I forgot I had a crawl space. And then they go to sell it and we got problems. So wanted to bring Ryan in. We're just going to talk a little bit about, if you own a home with a crawl space or you're going to be in the market, you're going to be seeing homes with crawl spaces, very common here in our area. And he's just going to give us some kind of tips, things to look for, kind of what his company does if an issue arises, because like most things, if there is a concern, you can fix it. It just takes money. And and you want to protect your investment. So I guess we'll start off with, something, that I notice is, some people I hear, especially moving from the north, they like older homes. They like older brick homes. They like the architecture of the mid 20th century, so they want an older home. Well, older home crawl spaces are different than crawl spaces the last 15, 20 years. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, the difference kind of in those ages of homes.
Absolutely. So like back in the, a long time ago, and I shouldn't say too long ago, but back in like the 40s through the 70s, I would say they were building all the homes with brick foundations. They were building them without anticipating them putting any plumbing or HVAC systems underneath the crawl space. So they weren't building them very tall. They weren't putting as many vents underneath them. They did put vents underneath them to allow for some air circulation down there. And then in the 70s and the 80s, when they started putting plumbing and HVAC ductwork down inside the crawl space, that introduction of outside air with a combination of the air temperature that's being put off from the HVAC system and even the plumbing was causing moisture, condensation, and relative humidity to cause issues underneath the house. So those problems became issues after they started putting those types of systems, the HVAC units and the plumbing underneath those houses that were never built to have those types of systems down there. They also didn't put plastic sheeting on the ground, so all of the water that is sitting in the soil was just being pushed up from hydrostatic pressure, and that little bit of moisture sitting on top of the surface of the ground could eventually evaporate and cause issues underneath the house, such as mold growth and wood rot, which could lead to a whole other mess of problems that we try to help customers avoid.
Yeah, and I'll even when you're buying a home in the summertime here in North Carolina, it's 100. As opposed to December when it's, 50. So, the moisture readings are different, and you might not see an issue, correct, with moisture in December, but then, you own the home for 6-7 months, and then you get to the summer, and, then you have issues that
Absolutely. So that relative humidity and condensation issue is definitely more prevalent during the warmer months of the year when you're running cold air through your ductwork and there's warm air coming in through the outside vents. That mixture of cold air and warm air on that ductwork is what causes the moisture to condense right on the ducts, and that's why you could buy a house in the wintertime and your home inspector can go down there and it looks nice and dry down there because they're not running too much cold air through their ductwork, and there's not a huge I guess contrast of cold and warm air happening inside the crawl space that's creating that condensation and drawing in more relative humidity. So, it could look dry in the wintertime, but you go down there in the summertime once you turn your air conditioner on, and then you go down there, it's like a rainforest. And that's when we do see higher wood moisture levels, and that's when things like sealing up a crawl space in a dehumidifier becomes something to consider at that time.
Right, and that's a great transition. So a buzzword here over the last few years, at least in this area, is fully encapsulated crawl space. I think a lot of people miss. They say that word, but then all it does is have the moisture barrier down. So there's definitely a big difference. You want to kind of hit on the basics and maybe even the pros and cons.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd actually really like to talk about that because the word encapsulation, you're exactly right, is something that is thrown around a lot without really knowing like the full meaning of what they're talking about. People tell me all the time before I show up to their house for an inspection that my crawl space was encapsulated in the past before I moved in, and now I'm having issues. And we get there, and sometimes it's just plastic sheeting on the ground, and that's not encapsulated at all. An encapsulated crawl space is when you fully seal a crawl space, have a vapor barrier on the ground that's providing 100% ground coverage, all the vents, penetration points where pipes and wires are going into the foundation wall, and the foundation line should be sealed with an expanding spray foam and foam board if the penetration points are large enough. And then also with an encapsulation, this is the part that a lot of people miss, is you're supposed to insulate the interior foundation walls of the crawl space rather than the floor joists. So North Carolina Building Code gives you the option of having either a minimum of R19 insulation in between the floor joists, which is what is commonly done by the builders with the fiberglass insulation and sometimes rock wool. Or they give you the option of doing a minimum of R10 insulation on the foundation walls. And a lot of times the wall insulation that people use is like a foam board. Some people do spray foam insulation. Our company does a waterproof insulation blanket. Okay. So putting the insulation on the foundation walls is a big difference in between a basic sealed crawl space and then a fully encapsulated crawl space, because you're rather than just insulating the home above, you're insulating the entire crawl space and the home above. So you can assume during the summertime and during the wintertime your crawl space is going to stay a more consistent temperature year round, and ultimately allow your dehumidifier, which would need to be placed inside of a crawl space like this, because once you're sealing up the space, you do want to turn it into a conditioned space. So you'd want to install a dehumidifier down there, but if you can maintain a consistent environment down there year long, it would help increase the efficiency of both that unit as well as potentially your HVAC system.
And it'll essentially, what I'm assuming as well is just keep the I see a lot of people where they use it almost like as a storage, like they put like their screens down there, or I don't know, I see fertilizer,
Christmas decorations,
Halloween
decorations,
right? Without feeling like it's gonna get ruined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People do that all the time, and it's really not a great idea unless the crawl space is going to be sealed and conditioned and protected from moisture, because we have been underneath houses where they were storing all their Christmas decorations, and December 1st came around and they went down there to go pull out decorations, and there was mold growing all over their stuff, and they become concerned for themselves, their family living inside the house, and that's when we come in and find these moisture issues. We do the wood moisture tests, and ultimately determine that the mold is a result of moisture, and they're leaving their wooden or their dead organic material in a mold conducive environment.
Absolutely. And look, let's just be honest, I've seen it countless times. High moisture, some growth on the joists, not heavy growth, but definitely growth. And look, it freaks some people out. Even though you try to give them like, listen, we're going into this, it's an older home, it's not sealed, we live in North Carolina, and then the home inspector uses the M word, is what I call it, and some people are understanding, but most people just think they're gonna die. Mm-hmm. And as I said when we started this, look, there is a solution, correct? So for this type of situation, very common.
Yeah.
You see growth, you can, it's not like the home is gonna fall over. For the most part, obviously, you go on with the inspector, but there is cleaning solutions. And
yeah, there are absolutely solutions, and it's something you do want to address. You know, you can definitely clean it and remove the mold and, you know, treat the wood and, you know, kind of eliminate the spores that are there. You know, we do think it's very important to eliminate the cause of the mold, because, you know, we can treat the mold all day and then come back in a year and there's potential, even if you're using very strong chemical, that mold could come back if the moisture is not addressed. So, you know, it's very important to take the preventative measures to make sure that the mold does not come back, because, you know, unfortunately in this region of the country it's very humid, and, you know, mold is pretty common underneath houses in North Carolina. It's extremely common, you know.
I'm almost more surprised when I don't see it.
Oh,
honestly, when a home inspector comes back and says, man, no growth, I'm like, wow, okay. I mean, sweet.
Exactly.
But it's not the norm.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, you know, June, July, August, even beginning of September, going through the purchase process. So if I own a home with a crawl space that is not encapsulated, so what are some maintenance tips a homeowner can do throughout the year to make sure that, you know, they're taking care of their investment and keeping themselves and their family safe from breathing in that stuff?
Well, you know, if you're not going to encapsulate a crawl space and put a dehumidifier down there and kind of guarantee, or even if you did have all that, you'd still want to check on the crawl space periodically. But if you don't have a sealed crawl space, I would recommend leaving the foundation vents underneath your crawl space open instead of closing them with the mechanical feature that most of the vents on these homes have. I would leave them open just to allow as much air circulation in the crawl space as possible. During the summertime, if you choose not to leave your crawl space open, I would even say it might be a good idea to put a fan down there, a small fan down there, just to increase the air circulation down there even more, just to, you know, keep the air moving and prevent the humidity from sitting in one spot and causing mold to ultimately grow above that on the floor joists and subfloor above it. Having a good vapor barrier on the ground that covers 100% of the floor is another good thing to have, that should be underneath every home and is not, you know, necessarily makes an encapsulation.
Yeah, I see sometimes where there's, like, you know, some plastic down there, but you know, I guess at one point it wasn't required that you had to do the whole, like, it was like, you know, you still got like a, I don't know, 3-foot gap around the whole perimeter, but in the middle's got the nice sheet, and then other ones don't have nothing, and, you know, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Over the years, it's definitely transitioned from like the early 40s and 50s to no vapor barrier on the ground at all, and then later in the 19th century or the 20th century, we put down the 6 mil vapor barrier that didn't cover 100% of the ground, and now we're requiring 100% ground coverage. So, you know, it's definitely changed over the years.
Okay. Now, what if? So should people get on there and crawl around under there and look for certain things? I mean, should they do that? I mean, I know probably everybody should, but would you say do that at least once a year?
I would say do it at least once a year, or call somebody to have them do it at least once a year. A lot of people already have a pest company or an HVAC company that goes down there once a year. You know, a lot of times we find that they are not looking for moisture related things, which, you know, I mean, I would at least ask them to, or you can call a crawl space specialist and have them go down there and take wood moisture readings and check for mold, because a lot of times the pest control company will you know, they're looking for pest stuff, as they should be, and the HVAC company is, you know, doing stuff with the HVAC system. So I would, you know, definitely would recommend having somebody go down there with, you know, looking for mold and looking for moisture intrusion and making sure that it's a protected space.
And that's the service you guys provide?
That is the service I would provide, yep.
Awesome. Yep. Yeah, and I'll just give a real world example here. Home right down the road here, a crawl space, older home, and the inspector came in, and it turned out that the stand-up shower in the master bedroom had been dripping for probably years. Well, it turns out this homeowner had also had a pest person come out, you know, and when the inspector got down there, he's like, man, this shower is literally so rotted. I mean, it's just any day now, you're gonna fall through the floor. And that was his reaction. The seller was not a happy person, because he's like, oh, well, what did the pest control company say? Sir, we're looking for vermin and termites. I'm not looking for your, you know, drip, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a mess. I mean, it was a lot of hurdles and a cost that no one was expecting, and the seller was upset and the buyer was upset. And again, but the gentleman lived there for 11 years and never went to the crawl space, not once in 11 years, and was just relying on a pest person to tell him if a shower was leaking. So
Yeah, the crawl space, like you said at the beginning, I mean, it's not a very highly paid attention to area of the home. You know, that's very common where people just, you know, will live there for a long period of time and then 10 years later discover all these problems and have all these costs that they weren't expecting. And, you know, it could be a real headache. So that's why we definitely recommend somebody check it out at least once a year, twice a year maybe.
Yeah.
You know, some people, you know, a lot of people aren't able to get in the crawl space, which is one thing, you know, and
Sure.
I understand. Some people are very eager to. Like some of our customers, they're, you know, crawling down there with me and,
Yeah.
you know, I get to their house and they're already down there hanging out. So, you know, some people are about it, but, you know, I recommend going and look down there at least once or twice a year.
And yeah, no doubt. And look, guys, it's your investment. I mean, I know sometimes that's you know, cliche or stereotypical, but look, I mean, you're paying a monthly payment. You know, most of us are paying well over $1,000. A small little drip in this gentleman's shower. If you know, I don't want to admit around $10,000 after it was all said and done that it cost them, because you rip out the shower, rip out the subfloor. I mean, it was not an overnight cheap you know, correction.
And a small drip is, I'd say, best case scenario, because a lot of things, it could have been the whole pipe like dumping inside the crawl space, and they may not have known about it for quite a while, and that could have caused erosion around the foundation pillars that would have, you know, could have caused serious issues to the structure of the home, and, you know, excessive, even just relative humidity sitting down there that will cause a mold to grow. You know, mold's one problem, but if you let it continue to grow, then it'll ultimately lead to wood rot, and then, you know, next thing you know, you're falling through the subfloor of your house, and you don't want that to happen, and that's, you know, when things get real expensive.
No doubt about it. All right, so again, we're just gonna wrap up here with Ryan. Again, I know crawl spaces can be a boring topic, but look, I mean, 9 times out of 10, when I'm involved in a home inspection, and if there's an issue, it's crawl space or attic. But I do find it's more crawl space because people will get in their attic because it's not dirty. You know, they'll at least get up there and they're like, wow, there's a brown stain on my, you know, on the decking. So
it's hot up here.
Yeah. So it's by far, you know, everything looks good, but if there's a crawl, it's just fact. And you know what? I know it's a pain sometimes that to get down there and pay attention, out of sight, out of mind, but I can't stress it enough. If you have a crawl space and haven't been down there, I would encourage you to call Ryan. I'm going to put all of his contact info in this link. You call him, text him, email him, all that good.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today, Justin. Yeah. It's been real nice talking to you. And if anyone wants to find me, my name is Ryan Leheny. You can go to our website at carolinacasa.com or find us on Instagram at carolinacasa.nc.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
Appreciate it.